You assume the moment you demand a divorce is when you finally regain control. I thought so too, until a stranger stood in my doorway and threw $150 million onto the table. He looked me in the eye and gave me a chilling warning not to wait 3 months. I soon realized those 90 days were not for crying over a broken marriage, but for setting the ultimate trap. My name is Elena Stone, and for the last 7 years, I have existed as a ghost in my own life. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of our condo on the 38th floor, looking out at the brutal Chicago winter, I realized I had finally become transparent. The wind was whipping off Lake Michigan, rattling the reinforced glass with a violence that matched the storm currently brewing inside my chest. I was 35 years old, a woman who had once managed high-stakes portfolios at a top firm, now reduced to managing the moods of a man who did not love me. The city lights below usually looked like scattered diamonds, but tonight, they just looked like cold, distant warning signals. It had started as a typical evening in the darker half of January. My husband, Grant, had rushed out the door claiming a client emergency. He was always in a rush these days, always frantic, always smelling of a cologne that seemed slightly fresher when he left than when he arrived home. In his haste, he had made a mistake, a fatal one. He had grabbed his work tablet but left his personal phone sitting on the marble kitchen island. I was chopping vegetables, the rhythmic sound of the knife against the wood usually soothing my nerves. When the screen lit up, I did not intend to pry. I had trained myself to be the trusting wife, the one who did not ask questions because she was afraid of the answers, but the notification was impossible to ignore. It was a message from a contact saved only as a single initial. B. The preview text glowed neon in the dim kitchen. You promised you would stay the night. I hate having to share you. My blood ran cold, freezing faster than the slush on the streets below. I put down the knife. My hands were trembling, but not with fear. It was a strange, vibrating frequency of rage. I picked up the phone. His passcode was still the date of our wedding, a detail that felt like a slap in the face given what I found inside. It was not just a fling, it was a parallel life. I scrolled through the photo gallery with a morbid curiosity. The finance seminar in Scottsdale last month? It was a lie. I found photos of a private villa at a resort I had always wanted to visit, but Grant had claimed was too expensive for our current budget. There were photos of them by the pool, cocktails in hand, looking at each other with a hunger he had not shown me in half a decade. I saw a woman with dark hair and a triumphant smile, Bianca. I did not know her, but I hated her with a clarity that frightened me. Then I checked the wallet application. The financial betrayal was even worse than the physical one. There were regular transfers to a boutique spa on Oak Street, receipts for diamond earrings, dinners at Alinea. He was bleeding us dry. But the kill shot, the thing that actually made me gasp for air, was a text message sent 3 days ago. She had asked if he felt guilty about lying to me. Grant's reply was staring back at me, glowing in the silence of the kitchen. He wrote, "Don't worry about her. My wife is meek. She doesn't know anything. Besides, think of it as her contributing to our future. I'm using the joint equity to invest in what matters. Us." Meek. The word echoed in my head. I had sacrificed my career to build his. I had downsized my life so he could upsize his ego. And this was my return on investment. I put the phone down. The silence in the apartment was deafening. I walked to the home office, a room I rarely entered anymore, and booted up the printer. The hum of the machine was the only sound in the house. I printed the divorce papers I had secretly downloaded months ago but never had the courage to fill out. I signed them with a steady hand. I placed them squarely in the center of the kitchen island, right next to his forgotten phone. For the first time in 7 years, I did not start dinner. The oven remained cold. The expensive ingredients sat on the counter, untouched and wilting. My phone rang, shattering the tension. It was my mother. I answered, trying to keep my voice steady, but the moment I heard her sob, my resolve began to fracture. She told me the bank had sent the final notice. My father's business debt had spiraled out of control. And they were foreclosing on the family home in Wilmette, the house I grew up in, the only safety net I thought I had left. "We have nowhere to go. Elena," my mother cried, her voice cracking. "They are giving us 30 days. I stood there, clutching the phone, realizing the cruel irony of my life. I was about to leave a millionaire who was stealing from me, only to return to a family that had lost everything. I told her I would fix it, though I had no idea how. I hung up, feeling the weight of the world crushing my lungs. I was trapped. If I stayed, I was a fool. If I left, I was destitute. But looking at that text message again, seeing the word meek, something snapped. I would rather sleep in the snow than spend another night in this mausoleum of a marriage. I decided right then, I would divorce him tonight. I would leave immediately. I would accept the scandal. I would accept the poverty. I just needed to be free. I went to the bedroom and pulled a suitcase from the closet. I packed only the essentials. No jewelry he bought, no clothes he liked, just me. The intercom buzzed. I froze. It was nearly midnight. Grant never used the buzzer. He had a key. Perhaps he had lost it, or maybe he was drunk. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I was not ready to face him, but the papers were already on the table. The war had already begun. I walked to the door, my eyes stinging and red from the tears I refused to let fall. I checked the camera, but the lens was obscured by the driving snow, showing only a dark silhouette. I took a deep breath, unlocked the deadbolt, and swung the door open, ready to scream, ready to throw the papers in his face, ready to end it all. But the man standing in the hallway was not Grant. He was tall, wearing a tailored black wool coat that was dusted with fresh snow. He had the kind of presence that sucked the oxygen out of the hallway. His hair was dark, slicked back from a face that was handsome but hard, like it had been carved from granite. His eyes were steel gray, and they locked onto mine with an intensity that made me step back. He did not look like a delivery man. He did not look like a neighbor. He looked like trouble. He looked at my tear-stained face, my disheveled hair, and he did not blink. He simply asked, in a voice that was low and dangerously calm, "Elena Stone?" I stepped back, allowing the stranger to cross the threshold of my apartment. It was not an invitation so much as a surrender to the inevitable force of his presence. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who owned every room he walked into, shaking the snow from his coat before looking around my living room with a critical, appraising eye. He did not look like a man who brought bad news. He looked like the bad news itself. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts to sound steel-hard. I tightened my grip on the door handle, realizing too late that I had let a complete stranger into my home at midnight while my husband was gone. He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "My name is Cameron Blackwell." The name landed with a heavy thud in the center of the room. Even in my self-imposed exile from the finance world, I knew who Cameron Blackwell was. He was a corporate raider, a ghost in the machine of Chicago's high-stakes equity market. He was known for hostile takeovers that were so clean and so devastating that companies did not realize they had been gutted until he was already walking away with the assets. "And," he continued, watching my face for a reaction, "Bianca Vale is my wife." The air left my lungs. The symmetry of it was almost laughable. The deceived wife and the deceived husband, standing in a multi-million-dollar condo, united by the sordid little affair our spouses were conducting. But Cameron Blackwell did not look like a grieving husband. He looked like a man conducting a business transaction. "I assume you are here because you know," I said, my voice hardening. "If you are looking for Grant, he is not here. He is at the office." Cameron let out a short, humorless laugh. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the blizzard. "Grant is not at the office. Elena, he is currently standing inside a boutique on Oak Street. He is purchasing a platinum bracelet. It is a birthday gift for Bianca." The specific detail: Oak Street, the bracelet, felt like a physical blow. I had to lean against the wall to steady myself. The humiliation was absolute. Grant had told me things were tight. He had told me we needed to cut back on expenses. And yet, here he was, buying platinum for another man's wife while my mother's house was being foreclosed upon. "I do not care," I spat out, the anger finally overriding the shock. I pointed a shaking finger at the kitchen table where the divorce papers lay. "I am done. I am divorcing him tonight. I am leaving this apartment, and I am never looking back." Cameron turned from the window. He looked at the papers on the table, then back at me. "Don't wait 3 months." I blinked, confused. "Excuse me? I just told you. I am doing it tonight. I am not waiting a single second, let alone 3 months." "You misunderstand me," Cameron said. Walking toward the dining table, he pulled out a chair and sat down, gesturing for me to do the same. It was infuriatingly calm. "I am not telling you to wait to act. I am telling you that if you scream and cry and serve him papers tonight, you lose. You will get a settlement. Sure, maybe enough to buy a small condo. But Grant has been hiding assets for 2 years. If you leave tonight, he wins." He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick manila envelope, sliding it across the marble surface until it hit the edge of my hand. "Open it." I hesitated, then opened the clasp. Inside were photos, hotel logs, and credit card receipts. But the most damning item was a small black flash drive. Cameron tapped it with his index finger. "Play the audio file labeled December 12th, he commanded. I pulled my laptop over and plugged it in. The audio quality was crisp. It was clearly recorded in a restaurant. I heard the clinking of silverware. And then, Grant's voice. It was unmistakably him. "She is clueless. Bianca." Grant's voice sneered through the speakers. "I have moved the liquid capital into offshore shells. By the time I serve her papers in the spring, on paper, I will be broke. She will get half of nothing. I'm going to push her out of the condo, claim it was a bad investment, and leave her with the debt." I slammed the laptop shut. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely feel my fingertips. It was not just infidelity, it was a calculated, systematic destruction of my life. He was not just cheating on me, he was planning to leave me destitute. "He is going to ruin me," I whispered. The reality of my mother's foreclosure crashed into the reality of my own impending bankruptcy. "He intends to," Cameron corrected, "but he hasn't done it yet." Cameron reached into his inner pocket again and withdrew a single sheet of paper, placing it on top of the pile of evidence. It was a bank document, a confirmation of funds. $150 million, Cameron said. I stared at the number. It was written out in black and white. $150 million. It was an impossible sum, a life-changing, dynasty-building sum. "This money," Cameron said, his voice dropping an octave, "is currently sitting in an escrow account. It is set to be transferred into a blind trust solely in your name, tax-free, untouchable by Grant, untouchable by anyone." "Why?" I asked, looking up at him. "Why would you give me this?" "Because I need a partner," Cameron replied. "I am in the middle of closing a massive acquisition deal that involves the Vale family, Bianca's family. If news of this affair breaks tonight, if you file for divorce and create a scandal, the Vale family will circle the wagons. They will pull out of the deal, the legal chain will snap, Grant will get tipped off, he will hide the rest of his money, and he will slip away. I lose my deal. You lose your dignity and your assets." He leaned forward, his steel eyes locking onto mine. "I need you to be my wife," he said, then paused. "Metaphorically, I need you to stay married to Grant for exactly 90 days. I need you to play the role of the happy, oblivious wife. You can file the divorce papers privately. You can set the legal trap, but you cannot spring it until I give the signal. You have to let Grant believe he is safe. You have to let him believe he is winning." "You want me to lie to him," I said, my mind racing. "You want me to sleep in the same bed as the man who is trying to destroy me." "I am buying your time," Cameron said coldly. "I am buying your silence, and in exchange, I am giving you the sword to cut his head off. $150 million. It clears your family's debt tomorrow. It secures your future forever. All you have to do is wait. Don't wait 3 months to start your revenge. Start it now, but do not let them know the execution date." He stood up, buttoning his coat. "The money transfers to the trust the moment you sign the non-disclosure agreement and the cooperation clause. But if you break character, if you scream at him when he walks through that door tonight, the deal is void. The money vanishes." He looked down at me, and for a second, I saw something other than the cold businessman. I saw a man who had been burned just as badly as I had, but who had chosen fire instead of tears. "So, Elena Stone," he asked, his hand on the doorknob, "do you want to leave clean, with your pride in a studio apartment, or do you want them to pay the right price for what they did?" I looked at the divorce papers I had been about to sign. Then I looked at the check confirmation. I swallowed hard, the taste of bile and betrayal thick in my throat. I realized that the woman who had opened the door 10 minutes ago was gone. She had died the moment she heard that recording. I looked up at Cameron Blackwell. "Where do I sign?" He did not smile. He simply slid a gold pen across the table. I was no longer a victim. I was an accomplice. And for $150 million, I could be the best actress Chicago had ever seen. The gold pen felt unnaturally heavy in my hand, cool to the touch, and slick against my sweating palm. I signed my name at the bottom of the document, the ink flowing dark and permanent. With that signature, I was not just agreeing to a contract, I was selling the next 90 days of my life. I capped the pen and pushed the paper across the marble table to Cameron. "Let us be clear about one thing," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "This is a strategic alliance. I am not your mistress. I am not your friend. We are co-conspirators, nothing more." Cameron picked up the document, his eyes scanning the signature briefly before meeting mine. "I do not mix business with pleasure, Elena. And make no mistake, destroying Grant Mercer is strictly business." He stood up, checking his watch. "You have 48 hours to execute the preliminary phase. I need you to do 3 things, and I need them done with absolute precision." He held up a finger. "First, open a secure bank account under your maiden name. Do not use any bank affiliated with your current mortgage or joint assets. Go to a credit union in a different suburb." He held up a second finger. "Second, digital sanitation. Scrub your browsing history. If you have searched for divorce lawyers, forensic accountants, or real estate listings, get rid of it. Grant thinks you are meek, but paranoia makes people check things they shouldn't." "And the third?" I asked. "Create a marriage dossier," Cameron said. "I need you to curate a digital trail of a happy wife. Post a throwback photo on social media. Text him about dinner reservations for next week. Make the digital footprint of your marriage look so solid that even a paranoid narcissist would feel safe." He handed me a sleek, black smartphone. It was a burner, preloaded with a prepaid SIM card. "This is the only line we communicate on. Keep it hidden, if he finds this. The game is over. Do not let your emotions drop the beat." With that, he turned and walked out into the snowstorm, leaving me alone in the apartment that felt less like a home and more like a stage set. The next morning, the reality of the $150 million settled in. It was not a suitcase of cash sitting in my living room. It was a conditional promise, a ghost sum locked in an escrow account that I could look at but not touch until the 90 days were up. However, part of our agreement involved an immediate retainer, a quiet advance to handle operational costs. My first act of war was saving my parents. I called the bank handling the foreclosure on the Wilmette house. My hand shook as I authorized the wire transfer. It drained the entirety of the operational advance Cameron had provided. But the silence on the other end of the line when the bank manager confirmed the debt was cleared was worth every penny. I called my mother 10 minutes later. She was weeping, asking how I had done it. "An old investment finally matured," I lied, the falsehood tasting like ash on my tongue. "Grant and I, We had some money put away in a long-term bond. I cashed it out. "Oh, thank God," she sobbed. "And thank Grant. I knew he was a good man deep down." I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to scream. "Yes, Mom, he is full of surprises." That afternoon, I walked into the offices of Sterling and Vance, a boutique law firm tucked away in a nondescript building in the Loop. It was not the kind of firm you found on billboards. It was the kind of firm you hired when you wanted to bury someone. I filed the petition for divorce. The lawyer, a sharp woman with glasses named Evelyn, looked at me with curiosity when I gave the instruction. "You want to file, but you do not want to serve him?" she clarified. "Not yet," I said, staring at the paperwork. "I want it stamped, dated, and locked in your safe. It is a pocket divorce. I will tell you when to pull the trigger." That evening, Grant came home. I heard the key turn in the lock, and for a split second, my old instinct flared, the urge to rush to the door, to take his coat, to ask about his day. Then I remembered the text message. Meek, I stayed seated on the sofa, reading a book I was not actually absorbing. Grant walked in, bringing the smell of cold wind and that faint, cloying scent of the boutique on Oak Street. He looked tense, his shoulders up around his ears, bracing himself for a fight because he had stayed out all night without calling. "Elena," he started, his voice pitching into a defensive whine. "Look, I know I didn't call. The client meeting ran late, and my phone died, and the charger was in the car." He was reciting a script, a bad one. Usually, this was the part where I would cry, ask why he didn't borrow a charger, and demand he respect my feelings. Instead, I turned a page of my book. "It is fine, Grant." He stopped, his mouth hanging open slightly. "It is? You work hard," I said, not looking up. "I put some leftovers in the fridge if you're hungry. If not, I am going to bed soon." The silence that followed was heavy. He walked into the living room, loosening his tie, staring at me as if I were a puzzle with a missing piece. He was waiting for the guilt trip. He needed the guilt trip. My anger made him feel important. My sadness made him feel powerful. My indifference? That terrified him. "Are you okay?" he asked, stepping closer. I looked up then, summoning every ounce of acting ability I possessed. I forced a soft, vacant smile onto my face. "I am just tired. Honey, the house is safe. My parents are okay. I think I just realized I have been stressing over things that do not matter." Grant relaxed, his ego filling in the blanks. He thought I meant I was done stressing about his schedule. He thought he had finally broken me completely. "That is good, babe," he said, walking over and kissing the top of my head. It took everything in me not to recoil. "I am doing this for us. You know, building our future." "I know," I said softly. Over the next week, I perfected the art of the void. I stopped asking who he was texting. I stopped tracking his location. I posted a photo of us from 2 years ago on Instagram with the caption, "Grateful for the life we are building." I watched him check it, saw the smug satisfaction on his face as he liked the post. He began to stay home more, unnerved by the lack of friction. He would watch me while I folded laundry or typed on my laptop, trying to find the cracks, but I was smooth glass. One night, while he was in the shower, washing off the scent of another woman, I sat at my vanity table. I picked up the burner phone Cameron had given me. There was a single encrypted message from him. "The trap is set on the finance side. Keep him comfortable. Do not let the mask slip." I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back had the same dark hair, the same eyes, the same mouth, but the softness around the jaw was gone. The pleading look in the eyes had hardened into something sharp and predatory. I was not Elena the wife anymore. I was Elena the operative. I typed back a single word. "Understood." Then I deleted the message, hid the phone inside a hollowed-out box of vintage face powder, and walked into the bedroom to ask my husband if he wanted a back rub. I would play the part. I would be the perfect, meek little wife, and in 83 days, I would take everything he had. The fourth day of my new life began not in my kitchen, but in the back of a soundproofed black SUV parked deep within the shadows of a lower Wacker Drive parking garage. It was a location chosen for its lack of cellular signal and surveillance. Cameron sat across from me, his laptop glowing in the dim light, casting harsh shadows on his angular face. "You need to stop thinking of Grant as a husband who strayed," Cameron said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "You need to start seeing him as what he actually is, an embezzler." He turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a complex web of spreadsheets and bank statements belonging to Mercer Row Holdings, Grant's private equity firm, to the outside world. Grant was a rising star, a man who turned mid-sized companies into gold mines. But the numbers on the screen told a story of a man who was setting fire to the building while selling tickets to watch the flames. "He is burning cash," Cameron explained, tapping a column of red figures. "Grant has been bleeding the company operating accounts to fund his lifestyle with Bianca, the private jets, the jewelry, the resort in Scottsdale. None of that came from his salary. It came from investor capital. He is moving money from the left pocket to the right pocket and hoping the auditors do not ask to see his pants." I scanned the documents, my old training as a financial analyst kicking in. The patterns were sloppy. He was desperate. But then Cameron clicked to a new tab, and the air left the car. It was a loan document, a secured line of credit for $4 million, and there, listed under the collateral section, was the address of my condo in Streeterville. "That is impossible," I whispered, my finger hovering over the screen. "The condo is in my name. My parents bought it for me before I even met Grant. He cannot use it as collateral without my signature." Cameron scrolled down to the bottom of the PDF. "Look closely. There, next to Grant's sprawling signature, was mine. It was a good forgery, but not perfect. The loop on the A was too wide. I remembered a night 3 months ago when Grant had rushed in with a stack of tax documents, claiming we needed to sign them immediately to avoid an audit penalty. I had signed where he pointed. Trusting him, I had signed away my safety net. "He stole my house," I said, the realization settling in my gut like lead. "He is planning to default, isn't he? He takes the $4 million, runs off with Bianca, and the bank takes my home." "That was his plan," Cameron said. He closed the laptop with a snap. "But he made a mistake. He borrowed the money from a distressed debt lender called Apex Capital." Cameron looked at me, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I own Apex Capital." I stared at him. The scale of his game was terrifying. "I bought his debt. Elena, all of it. Every dime Mercer Row owes. They now owe to me, and I have found a clause in the loan agreement. It is called a technical default. If the borrower fails to maintain a certain liquidity ratio, which Grant has already failed to do, the lender has the right to accelerate the debt. That means I can demand full repayment of the entire $4 million immediately, not in 3 months, today." "So why don't you?" I asked. "Because if I call the loan now, he declares bankruptcy, and the court fights take years." Cameron replied, "We need him to convert the debt into equity. We need him to sign over control of his company to Apex in a desperate attempt to save himself. Once he signs that, I own his company. I own his assets. I own him." He handed me a thick binder. "Study this. Learn what a debt-to-equity swap looks like. Learn what an acceleration clause is. When he starts panic-talking about investors, you need to know exactly which lie he is telling." I went home that evening with the binder hidden in my tote bag. The atmosphere in the condo had shifted. Grant was no longer just tense. He was vibrating with anxiety. He was pacing the living room, his phone glued to his ear, his voice tight and high. "I told you, the liquidity is coming," he was saying into the phone, sweat beading on his forehead. "I just need another week. My wife, she has assets I can leverage. Yes, I am working on it." He hung up when he saw me, shoving the phone into his pocket. "Work trouble?" I asked, keeping my voice light, walking into the kitchen to pour a glass of water. Just standard market fluctuations, Grant lied, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace. Nothing for you to worry your pretty head about. Hey, I might need to go to New York this weekend. Emergency board meeting. I knew for a fact there was no board meeting. Cameron's data showed that Bianca had booked a suite at the St. Regis in New York for the weekend. Oh, that is a shame, I said, leaning against the counter. Taking a sip of water. I was looking at the calendar, and our 7th anniversary is coming up in 2 weeks. I was hoping we could plan something special. Maybe go back to that vineyard where we got married? I watched his eyes dart around the room. He was trapped. He couldn't commit because he planned to be gone by then. But he couldn't say no without raising suspicion. Of course, babe, he stammered. We will do something huge. I just need to get this deal closed first. Once the investors are happy, I am all yours. I reached into my pocket and pressed the stop button on the voice recorder app I had running on the burner phone. I cannot wait, I said. Later that night, I sat in the guest room, which I had claimed was for reading, but was actually my war room. I listened to the recording of his lie. Every word was a brick in the wall I was building around him. I sent the audio file to Cameron. His reply came 2 minutes later. Good. We do not need to win by screaming at him. We win with minutes. We win with records. Keep him talking. I felt a surge of cold power. For years, Grant had made me feel small, unintelligent, and dependent. Now, I was dissecting his financial corpse while he was still walking around in it. I knew his margins. I knew his debt covenants. I knew the exact date he would run out of cash. My laptop pinged with a new email notification. It was to my secure, encrypted address, the one only Cameron knew. I assumed it was another instruction or a new batch of evidence. I opened it. The subject line was blank. The sender was an alphanumeric string that looked like a burner address. The message body contained only 2 sentences. If you want to know who is really pulling Bianca Vale's strings, stop looking at her husband. And do not trust Cameron Blackwell 100%. I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. The thrill of the hunt suddenly turned into a chill. I looked at the burner phone Cameron had given me, sitting innocently on the desk. He was using me to destroy Grant. Yes, but the email suggested a game much larger than a simple revenge plot. I closed the laptop slowly. Cameron had told me to hunt. He just hadn't told me that I might be prey as well. I told Grant I was going to Milwaukee to visit a college friend who had just had a baby. It was a lazy lie, the kind that would have crumbled under the slightest scrutiny. If he had asked for a name, or a photo, or even flight details, I would have stuttered, but Grant did not scrutinize. He barely looked up from his phone, his thumb swiping rapidly across the screen, likely confirming dinner reservations with Bianca. He simply nodded, muttered something about having the house to himself to get some work done, and practically pushed me out the door. The relief on his face was insulting. He was not just happy I was leaving, he was ecstatic to be unoccupied. 2 hours later, I was not in Wisconsin. I was stepping off a Gulfstream G650 at a private airfield outside Las Vegas. The heat hitting the tarmac was a shock after the Chicago winter. Dry and aggressive, Cameron was waiting in a black SUV on the runway, wearing sunglasses that cost more than my first car. 36 hours, Cameron said as I slid into the leather seat. We are in and out. This is a surgical strike, not a vacation. We checked into a suite at the Cosmopolitan, but we did not go to the casino floor. Instead, the living area of the suite had been transformed into a war room. 3 lawyers and 2 forensic accountants were already there, surrounded by stacks of documents. This was not about my divorce anymore. This was corporate warfare. We are modeling the fallout, Cameron explained, pouring himself a sparkling water. When the news of the affair breaks, the Vale family will panic. Their stock price is tied to their reputation for family values. It is ironic, really. When the stock dips, I buy, but I need to know exactly how deep the dip will be. I sat in the corner, listening. I realized then that Cameron was not just a scorned husband seeking revenge. He was a predator waiting for a wounded animal to limp away from the herd. He did not just want to hurt Bianca. He wanted to absorb her family's real estate empire for pennies on the dollar. The affair was his weapon, and I was the trigger mechanism. During a break, I went down to the lobby to get a coffee, needing to escape the suffocating smell of ambition in that suite. I was waiting for my order when a voice behind me made me freeze. Elena Stone? I turned to see a face from a lifetime ago. It was Marcus Cole, my old managing director from Crownfield Advisory. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes were still sharp. "Marcus," I managed, my heart hammering. "I haven't seen you since I left the firm." 7 years, he said, shaking his head. "You were the brightest analyst I ever hired. I still don't understand why you quit to become a housewife." He paused, his gaze drifting over my shoulder. I followed his line of sight and saw Cameron walking toward us. Marcus stiffened. "You are with Blackwell?" Marcus asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It is complicated," I said. "Business." Marcus stepped closer, his expression grave. "Elena, listen to me. Cameron Blackwell does not have partners. He has tools. I saw what he did to the granddaughter of the CEO of Omnicorp 3 years ago. He engineered a scandal to drop the share price so he could force a merger. He destroys people to move decimal points. Be careful." Cameron arrived before I could respond, placing a hand on the small of my back. It was possessive, territorial. Marcus nodded stiffly and retreated, leaving me with a cold pit in my stomach. That evening, Cameron took me to dinner at a private table overlooking the Bellagio fountains. He was teaching me how to extract information without asking questions. "The best way to get the truth is not to demand it," he said, cutting his steak with surgical precision. "It is to state something slightly wrong. People have a compulsive need to correct you. If you want to know where Grant is hiding the money, do not ask where. Say to him, 'I know the Cayman accounts are drying up.' He will panic and shout, 'The accounts are in Zurich, you crazy woman,' and then you have him." As we walked out through the crowded casino floor, the noise was deafening. A drunken tourist, stumbling with a yard-long margarita, lurched violently toward me. Before I could react, Cameron moved. It was a blur of motion. He stepped between us, his arm shooting out to block the man, his other arm wrapping around my waist to pull me tight against his chest. For a second, the world narrowed down to the scent of his sandalwood cologne and the hard muscle of his chest against my cheek. I felt safe. I felt protected. Then I remembered Marcus's words. He destroys people to move decimal points. I pulled away sharply, smoothing my dress. Cameron looked at me, his eyes dark, searching my face for a reaction. I gave him none. I turned and walked toward the elevators, my heart rate spiking not from romance, but from fear. He was too good at this, and if I let myself trust him, I would be the next casualty on his balance sheet. Back in the room, I locked myself in the marble bathroom. I turned on the shower to mask the sound of my voice and pulled out the burner phone. I dialed a number I had memorized from a billboard in Chicago. A private investigator named Silas, who specialized in corporate espionage. "I need a full background check," I whispered into the phone. "Deep dive. The target is Cameron Blackwell." "That is expensive," Silas grunted on the other end. "And dangerous." "I have money," I said, thinking of the operational fund Cameron had given me, "and I am already in danger." Silas called me back 4 hours later, just as the sun was rising over the desert. "You were right to check," Silas said, his voice crackling with static. "I found a sealed court file from 5 years ago. Blackwell was sued by a minority shareholder in a tech firm he acquired. The accusation was manipulative takeover practices. Specifically, he was accused of planting evidence of fraud to lower the valuation before buying. The case was settled out of court for an undisclosed sum, but the plaintiff committed suicide 2 months later." I hung up the phone. I looked out at the strip, the neon lights looking garish and fake in the morning light. The anonymous email was right. Marcus was right. Cameron was not my savior. He was another shark swimming in the same tank. He was using Grant's infidelity to crash the Vale family stock, and he was using me to ensure the scandal hit at the exact right moment. I walked back into the main room. Cameron was already up, reading the Wall Street Journal. He looked up and smiled, a predator's smile. "Ready to go home and play the loving wife?" he asked. "Yes," I said, returning his smile with one of my own. It was a cold, sharp thing. I realized then that this was not a duet. It was a Mexican standoff. Grant was the fool. Cameron was the villain. And I had to decide right then that I would not be the victim. I would be the one left standing when the smoke cleared. I was going to take Grant down. But I was going to keep a knife hidden in my boot for Cameron Blackwell, too. Because in this game, nobody was going to save me but myself. The Gold Coast room at the Drake Hotel was smelling of expensive perfume, stale champagne, and desperate ambition. It was the kind of charity gala where the ticket price could feed a family of 4 for a year, yet the hors d'oeuvres were microscopic, and the smiles were even thinner. I stood next to Grant, my arm looped through his, playing the role of the trophy wife to perfection in a midnight blue gown that cost more than my first car. Grant, however, was vibrating. His tuxedo fit perfectly, but he kept running a finger inside his collar as if it were a noose. "Relax," I murmured, leaning in close so it looked like intimacy rather than instruction. "You are sweating. Grant, it does not look good for the brand." He shot me a sharp, irritated look. "I am not sweating. It is just stifling in here. Why do they always overheat these events?" He was lying. The air conditioning was blasting, chilling the room to a crisp 65 degrees. Grant was sweating because he was terrified. Since I had started playing the ignorant, supportive wife at home while secretly tightening the financial screws with Cameron. Grant had been living on the edge of a nervous breakdown. He knew his liquidity was drying up, but he did not know why. He thought it was bad luck. He did not know it was me. Then, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The low hum of polite conversation broke as heads turned toward the main entrance. Bianca Vale had arrived. She was not wearing black, navy, or gold, the unwritten uniform of Chicago's old money wives. She was wearing scarlet red. The dress was backless, plunging, and aggressive. It was a declaration of war stitched in silk. But what made Grant stiffen beside me was not the dress. It was the man on her arm. It was Arthur Sterling, a real estate developer in his late 60s, known for 2 things: his massive portfolio and his habit of sponsoring young, attractive women who wanted to open boutiques. Bianca was clinging to his arm, laughing loudly at a joke he hadn't even finished telling, her eyes scanning the room until they locked onto Grant. "Jesus," Grant hissed under his breath. "What is she doing here?" "Who?" I asked innocently, following his gaze. "Oh, the woman in red? She is striking. Isn't that Bianca Vale? I follow her lifestyle blog. I think she posted about a new beginning just this morning." Grant choked on his champagne. You follow her?" "Of course," I smiled, a shark baring teeth. "She has such a unique approach to branding. Come on, let's say hello. I would love to meet her." Before Grant could stop me, I pulled him across the room. I felt him resisting, his heels digging into the plush carpet, but he could not cause a scene without drawing attention. We intercepted them near the ice sculpture. "Bianca!" I exclaimed, extending a hand. "I am Elena Stone, Grant's wife. I feel like I know you already," Bianca faltered. She had expected me to be the mousy, oblivious housewife Grant had described. She was not prepared for a woman who looked her in the eye with a predatory calm. She awkwardly shifted her clutch to shake my hand. "Elena," she said, her voice tight, "Grant talks about you, occasionally, and he talks about you so much," I lied smoothly, "mostly about your spa investments. It is so inspiring how you manage to find generous partners to fund your visions." I glanced meaningfully at Arthur Sterling, who was beaming, oblivious to the tension. "I love how you just do not care what people think. It is brave. The insult landed. Bianca's eyes narrowed. She knew exactly what I was saying. I was calling her a gold digger to her face, in front of her lover and her mark, all while smiling like a debutante. Grant stepped in, his voice cracking. "We should go find our table. Elena." "Lovely meeting you," I said to Bianca, holding her gaze a second too long. "I hope you get everything you deserve." 10 minutes later, I excused myself to use the powder room. I knew exactly where Grant would go. He couldn't handle the pressure. I bypassed the restrooms and slipped down the service corridor that led to the smoking terrace. I didn't go outside. I stayed in the shadows of the heavy velvet drapes near the exit. I heard them before I saw them. "Are you insane?" Grant's voice was a harsh whisper. "Bringing Arthur Sterling here? Are you trying to humiliate me?" "You are humiliating yourself." "Grant!" Bianca's voice was shrill, losing its cultivated smoothness. "You said you would leave her 3 months ago. You said the money was ready. Now you are telling me your accounts are frozen? I have bills. Grant, the boutique lease is due." "It is a temporary audit," Grant pleaded. "My investors are just doing a standard compliance check. I cannot move the assets until they sign off. If I file for divorce now, the auditors will freeze everything. You have to wait." "I am done waiting," Bianca spat. "Arthur is offering to open a second location for me in Miami if you do not file those papers by Monday. I am walking. And Grant, I won't go quietly." "What does that mean?" Grant asked, panic rising in his voice. "It means I have that video from the suite in Scottsdale," Bianca threatened. "The one where you talk about how you cook the books at your firm. If I send that to the SEC, you won't just be divorced, you will be in federal prison." I stood in the shadows, my heart pounding not with fear, but with adrenaline. Cameron was right. They were cannibals. When the food ran out, they started eating each other. I slipped back into the ballroom before they could see me. When Grant returned to our table 5 minutes later, he looked like a man who had seen a ghost. His face was pale, and his hands were trembling so badly he knocked over his water glass. "We need to leave," he muttered, signaling for the waiter. "But they haven't served the entree," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Is everything okay?" He whipped his head toward me, his eyes wide and manic. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "Like what?" "Like you know something," he snapped, his voice rising enough that the couple at the next table glanced over. "You have been acting strange all week. Are you seeing someone? Is that it? Are you cheating on me?" I almost laughed. The projection was textbook. He was so consumed by his own guilt and the closing walls of his lies that he had to cast me as the villain to make sense of his reality. I picked up my napkin and dabbed the corner of my mouth slowly. "Grant, look at me. You wanted a wife who asks no questions. You wanted a wife who stays in her lane. I am doing exactly what you wanted. I am sitting here, being quiet, and letting you lead. Why does that terrify you so much?" He opened his mouth to answer, but his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and the color drained from his face completely. It was likely a follow-up threat from Bianca, or perhaps a notification from his bank that another transfer had failed thanks to Cameron's interference. My own clutch vibrated. I slid my hand inside and checked the screen of the burner phone. One message from Cameron. "He is going to make a mistake tonight. Do not stop him." Grant stood up abruptly, nearly knocking his chair over. "I have to go. Emergency at the office. You stay. Take an Uber home." "Grant, it is 11 o'clock at night," I said, feigning concern. "Just do as you are told," he hissed. He turned and practically ran toward the exit, leaving me alone at a table for two in the middle of a room full of Chicago's elite. I watched him go. He was running to fix a leak in a dam that had already burst. He was running to silence Bianca, or to move money that was already gone. I signaled the waiter. "My husband had a sudden business crisis," I said with a sad, apologetic smile. "Could you please bring the champagne bottle? I think I will stay for the speeches." As the waiter poured the bubbling gold liquid into my glass, I took a sip. It tasted crisp and cold. Grant was gone. Bianca was on the warpath, and I was sitting in the center of the storm, perfectly dry, waiting for the lightning to strike. The blizzard that had been threatening Chicago all week finally slammed into the city with the force of a freight train. At exactly 10:17 at night, the power grid in Streeterville gave up the ghost. The hum of the refrigerator died. The ambient lights of the appliances winked out, and my 38th floor condo was plunged into a heavy, suffocating darkness. Outside, the wind howled against the glass, a high-pitched shriek that sounded like something dying. I sat on the velvet sofa, wrapped in a cashmere throw, watching the snow whip past the windows. The city below was a patchwork of black squares where the outages had hit. I lit a single candle on the coffee table, the flame dancing frantically in the draft that seemed to seep through the walls. The front door crashed open. Grant stumbled in, not drunk, but delirious with adrenaline. He did not even notice the power was out at first. He was too busy muttering to himself. A stream of consciousness fueled by panic. He had a flashlight in his hand, the beam jerking wildly around the room, slicing through the darkness. "Where are they?" he hissed, ripping his coat off and throwing it on the floor. "I know I left the incorporation papers here. Someone moved them. Someone is watching me." He was unraveling. The threat from Bianca at the gala had pushed him over the edge. He was terrified that she would make good on her promise to send the SEC that video. He was tearing through the drawers of the hallway console, tossing mail and keys onto the floor. "Grant," I said, my voice calm, trying not to startle a wild animal. "The power is out. You are going to hurt yourself." He spun around, the flashlight beam blinding me for a second before he lowered it. His eyes were wide, rimmed with red. "You," he said, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Did you let anyone in here today? Did the cleaning lady come? Did she touch my briefcase?" "No one has been here, Grant," I lied. "Just sit down. You are hyperventilating." He ignored me. Marching into the living room, he began pulling books off the shelves, shaking them out. "Bianca said she knows things she shouldn't know. How does she know about the shell company in Delaware? Unless someone told her, unless there is a bug in this house." He was getting close, dangerous close. I shifted on the sofa, intending to stand up and guide him to the kitchen, to distract him with a drink, but as I moved, I felt a vibration against my thigh. My heart stopped. I had forgotten to silence the burner phone. I had shoved it between the cushions when the lights went out, intending to check it later. Now, it was buzzing against the upholstery, a low, rhythmic zzzt, zzzt, zzzt that sounded like a jackhammer in the silence of the room. Grant froze. He turned his head slowly toward the sofa, like a dog hearing a whistle. "What is that?" he whispered. "Nothing," I said quickly, reaching down to grab it. "It is just my phone." "Your phone is on the charger in the kitchen," Grant said, his voice dropping to a terrifying monotone. "I saw it when I came in." He lunged. I tried to block him, but he was faster, fueled by paranoia. He shoved my hand aside and jammed his fingers into the crevice of the sofa. He pulled out the black smartphone, sleek, unfamiliar, and currently lighting up the dark room. He looked at the screen. The caller ID displayed a single name, Cameron. The silence that followed was heavier than the darkness. Grant looked at the phone, then at me, his face contorted, a mix of confusion and exploding rage. "Cameron?" he choked out. "Cameron Blackwell? The corporate raider?" He grabbed my upper arm, his fingers digging into my bicep hard enough to bruise. He hauled me to my feet, shaking me. "You are sleeping with him?" he screamed, his spit flying onto my face. "That is your game? You act like a saint, but you are screwing the enemy? Is that how he knows? Did you give him my files? Did you sell me out for a romp in a hotel room?" "Grant, let go of me," I cried out, struggling against his grip. The physical pain was sharp, but the fear was colder. He was not thinking. He was reacting. If he thought I was just a cheating wife, he might hit me. If he realized I was a spy, he might kill me. "Tell me," he roared, shaking me again. How long? How long have you been? Bam, bam, bam. The pounding on the front door was so loud it sounded like a battering ram. It cut through Grant's scream instantly. He froze, his grip on my arm loosening slightly. Police? A voice boomed from the hallway. Or at least, it sounded authoritative enough to be police. Grant dropped my arm and stepped back, looking at the door in terror. Oh God, they are here. The SEC sent the feds. He looked at me, his eyes pleading now. Elena, hide the laptop. Hide the cash in the safe. I rubbed my throbbing arm, saying nothing. Grant walked to the door. Trembling, he unlocked it slowly, expecting handcuffs. Instead, the door swung open to reveal Cameron Blackwell. He stood there in a long charcoal trench coat, illuminated by the emergency lights of the hallway. He looked impeccable, untouched by the storm. Behind him stood a woman I did not recognize, holding a briefcase, looking bored. Cameron looked past Grant, his eyes locking onto me. He saw me clutching my arm. His jaw tightened imperceptibly, a flicker of genuine anger crossing his face before the mask slammed back down. Mr. Mercer, Cameron said, his voice smooth as glass. I apologize for the late hour, but your wife has been trying to reach me. And when you did not answer, she became concerned. Grant blinked, his brain misfiring. What? My wife? Called you? Cameron stepped into the apartment. Forcing Grant to back up, the assistant followed, closing the door behind them. Elena came to me 3 days ago. Cameron lied effortlessly, walking into the living room as if he owned the building. She was terrified. Grant, she told me your company was in trouble. She begged me to help you. She said her husband was a brilliant man who had just made a few bad calls, and she wanted to save his legacy. Grant turned to me, his mouth hanging open. Elena? You did that? I stared at Cameron. He was rewriting the narrative in real time. He was turning my betrayal into an act of supreme loyalty. He was giving Grant a way out that kept his ego intact. I could not let you lose everything. Grant, I said, my voice trembling, partly from the acting, partly from the shock of the near violence. I knew Cameron invested in distressed assets. I thought he could help. Cameron picked up the burner phone from where Grant had dropped it on the floor. He wiped it on his coat and handed it to me. She has been acting as a confidential liaison, Cameron said, turning his cold gaze to Grant. Because she wanted to protect your pride. She has been feeding me financials so I could build a rescue package. And instead of thanking her, I find you shouting at her in the dark. Grant looked at his feet, shame washing over his face. He was a bully, and like all bullies, he shrank in the presence of true power. He looked at me, then at Cameron. I didn't know, Grant stammered. I thought she was cheating. She is the only reason I'm standing here instead of a federal prosecutor, Cameron said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Now, my assistant has the preliminary restructuring agreement. I was going to wait until morning. But since you are clearly incapable of managing your own stress, we will settle this now. Now? Grant asked. Be at my office at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Cameron commanded. Bring the incorporation files, the ledger, and the full debt schedule. If you are late, the offer is off, and I let the bank foreclose on this condo by noon. Do you understand? Yes, Grant whispered. Yes, Mr. Blackwell. Thank you. And I am sorry. Don't apologize to me, Cameron said, buttoning his coat. Apologize to your wife. Grant turned to me, his eyes wet. Elena, I am so sorry. I am losing my mind. Thank you for trying to save us. Just go to bed. Grant, I said, turning away. Please. Grant nodded and retreated to the bedroom like a scolded child. Cameron lingered at the door for a second. The assistant had already stepped out. He looked at my arm where Grant had grabbed me. Are you all right? He mouthed. No sound coming out. I nodded. He tapped his watch, then pointed to the floor. Then he left, the door clicking shut softly behind him. I stood there in the candlelight, the adrenaline fading into a cold chill. I replayed the last 10 minutes in my head. The phone rang. Grant grabbed me. Cameron knocked. It had all happened in less than 60 seconds. There was no way Cameron could have driven here, come up 38 floors, and arrived at my door in 60 seconds after I missed his call. He had been in the hallway. He had been standing outside my door before the phone even rang. He had been listening, or watching. I realized then that the rescue was not a stroke of luck. It was a scripted event. Cameron knew Grant would come home. He knew the pressure was peaking. He had been waiting for the moment Grant snapped so he could swoop in and play the savior. I looked at the burner phone in my hand. It wasn't just a communication device. It was a leash. And the man holding the other end was far more dangerous than the husband I was trying to escape. The morning after the blackout, my husband transformed into a caricature of a repentant spouse. I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and the sight of Grant placing a vase of oversized white lilies on the kitchen island. He was wearing a soft cashmere sweater, moving with a humble, tentative energy that was far more nauseating than his arrogance. "I made you an omelet," he said, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his panicked eyes. "Egg whites and spinach, your favorite." I looked at the food. It was perfectly cooked, a gesture of domestic intimacy from a man who, 12 hours earlier, had nearly dislocated my shoulder in a fit of rage. He was terrified. He believed that I was the bridge between him and Cameron Blackwell, the only thing stopping the financial executioner from dropping the axe. He was trying to buy my loyalty with breakfast foods and floristry. "Thank you, Grant," I said, my voice flat. I took a bite, swallowing the revulsion along with the eggs. "I was thinking," he stammered, pouring me coffee with a shaking hand. "Maybe this weekend, after the meeting with Cameron, we could go up to the lake house? Just the two of us? Reconnect?" I looked at him. He was desperate to get me out of the city, desperate to keep me happy so I would keep whispering sweet nothings into Cameron's ear. But I knew the truth. Every time his phone buzzed in his pocket, which it did, relentlessly, he flinched. Bianca was not letting him go. She was tightening the screws, demanding he liquidate assets before the rescue package froze everything. By noon, the facade of the doting husband cracked. Grant locked himself in his home office, claiming he needed to prepare the debt schedules for Cameron. I sat in the living room, my laptop open, monitoring the network traffic on our home router. A little trick the forensic accountant had taught me in Vegas. I watched the data packets fly. Grant wasn't preparing schedules. He was accessing the offshore banking portal for Mercer and Rowe. I pulled up the screen mirroring software Cameron had installed on Grant's laptop months ago. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Grant was initiating a wire transfer. He was moving $48 million, essentially the entire remaining liquidity of his firm, to an account in the Cayman Islands held by a shell corporation called Blue Horizon Ventures. He was stealing the money. He thought that if he moved it now, before he signed the deal with Cameron, he could hide it. He thought he could sign the company over to Cameron as an empty shell, flee with Bianca, and live off the $48 million while Cameron was left holding the bag of debt. It was bold, it was criminal, and it was incredibly stupid. My burner phone buzzed. It was a text from Cameron. He just pulled the trigger. $48 million. I typed back, "He thinks he is outsmarting you. He is moving it to the Caymans." Cameron's reply came instantly. "He is moving it to a correspondent bank in Miami that handles the Cayman transactions, a bank where I sit on the board of directors. He didn't just hide the money, Elena. He just wired it directly into a frozen account that I control. He just signed his own confession for federal wire fraud." I looked up at the closed office door. I could hear Grant pacing, probably celebrating his brilliance. He had just handed Cameron the murder weapon. I spent the next 2 hours compiling the dossier. I downloaded the digital transfer receipt, the IP logs, proving it came from this house, and the fake invoices Grant had hastily created to justify the transfer as consulting fees. I printed everything, sliding the papers into a pristine leather folder. It was the collapse file, the final nail. But just as I was closing the laptop, An encrypted email arrived from Silas, my private investigator. I had almost forgotten about him in the chaos of the transfer. The subject line was, "The Vales are cutting their losses." I opened the attachment. It was a transcript of a phone call, likely obtained through less than legal means, between Bianca's father and the family's chief legal counsel. "Bianca is a liability," the father's voice was transcribed in stark courier font. "If this affair with Mercer goes public, it taints the merger. We need to distance the family trust from her. Cut her access to the capital. Let Blackwell have the Mercer Company. But ensure Bianca is isolated. If she sinks alone." I read the next paragraph, and my blood ran cold. "Blackwell knows we are cutting her," the lawyer replied. "He is counting on it. He is driving the scandal so he can pick up the Vale commercial properties in the fallout. He doesn't care about the wife. He is using her to spook Mercer into destroying himself." He doesn't care about the wife. I sat back, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me. Cameron had played me perfectly. He had sold me a story of righteous vengeance, of a partnership, but to him, I was just another asset class. I was a tool to create enough chaos to lower the stock price of the Vale Empire so he could buy it. Once Grant was destroyed and Bianca was disowned, Cameron would walk away with everything: Grant's company, the Vale properties, and the satisfaction of a complete victory. And me? I would be left with my $150 million. Sure, but I would also be the woman who helped him do it. I would be the collateral damage he discarded once the deal closed. And who was to say that the escrow account didn't have a loophole too? If Cameron could trap Grant in a technical default, he could certainly trap me in a contract violation. I looked at the leather folder containing Grant's life sentence. Then I looked at the mirror. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "I am not a pawn." I stood up and grabbed my coat. I had one more stop to make before the final showdown. I went to see Evelyn, my lawyer, but not to discuss the divorce. I handed her a document I had drafted myself, based on the loan agreements I had studied in Cameron's car. "I need to execute the protection clause on the condo," I told her. "Grant used it as collateral for the Apex Capital loan, but the deed is in my name. Under Illinois law, if I can prove spousal fraud regarding the signature, I can sever the lien." "That will take months to litigate," Evelyn warned, looking over the papers. "And if Cameron Blackwell holds the debt, he will fight you." "He won't fight me," I said, my voice hard, "because I am going to transfer the title into a blind trust today, and I am going to attach a lis pendens to the property records. If Cameron tries to foreclose on this condo tomorrow to punish me, he will be tied up in litigation for 5 years. He hates slow money. He will back off." Evelyn looked at me with new respect. "You have been doing your homework, Elena." "I had good teachers," I said. "I learned from the worst." We filed the paperwork electronically. The condo was safe. Grant couldn't lose it. And Cameron couldn't take it. It was my first move on the board that wasn't dictated by Cameron. I walked out onto the snowy street, the wind biting at my face. I took out the burner phone. I looked at the text thread with Cameron. He was expecting me to be the good soldier, to sit tight and wait for his signal to destroy Grant. I typed a message. It was short. It was dangerous. "I have the evidence of the $48 million transfer. I am ready to push the button. But I am doing it my way. Do not interrupt me." I hit send. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned off the phone and dropped it into a trash can on the corner of Michigan Avenue. I was done taking orders. Tomorrow morning. I wasn't just going to a meeting to watch Grant die. I was going to a meeting to remind Cameron Blackwell that he wasn't the only one who knew how to hunt. The night before the execution, my husband opened a bottle of vintage Cabernet that he had been saving for our 10th anniversary. He poured the dark red liquid into 2 crystal glasses, the sound echoing in the high-ceilinged living room like a premature victory bell. Grant was vibrating with a manic energy, pacing the floorboards, gesturing with his glass as if conducting an orchestra that only he could hear. "You have no idea, Elena," he said, taking a large gulp of the wine. "Tomorrow is going to be historical. I walk into that room. I signed the restructuring deal with Blackwell. And the market reacts. The stock is going to fly. I will be the CEO who navigated the company through a liquidity crisis and came out stronger. And the best part? The cash is safe. I moved it. It is sitting in an account that Blackwell cannot touch. I sat on the edge of the sofa, watching him. He looked so confident, so assured of his own brilliance. He had no idea that he had wired $48 million directly into a trap, or that the man he thought was his savior was actually his butcher. It sounds like a perfect plan, Grant, I said, my voice steady. It is, he grinned, his teeth stained slightly purple. And you were the key. If you hadn't charmed Blackwell, if you hadn't convinced him to come to the table, I might be in trouble. But you did it. You really are a good wife. Elena, when this is all over, I am going to buy you that vacation home in Aspen. He toasted me. I raised my glass but did not drink. I just watched him, feeling a strange sense of detachment. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger implies that you still care about the outcome, that you still have something to lose. I had nothing left to lose. I went to the bedroom early, leaving Grant to celebrate with his reflection. I walked into the walk-in closet and pushed aside the floral dresses, the soft pastels, the clothes Grant liked because they made me look non-threatening. I reached for the back of the rack and pulled out a suit I hadn't worn in 7 years. It was black, sharp, and tailored to within an inch of its life. It was the suit I had worn the day I made senior analyst at Crownfield. I hung it on the door. Then I sat at my vanity. I did not hire a makeup artist. This was a private ritual. I applied my foundation with deliberate strokes, covering the shadows under my eyes from the sleepless nights. I contoured my cheekbones, sharpening the angles of my face. I painted my lips a deep, matte red, not a color of seduction, but a color of war. I was not painting my face to look beautiful for a man. I was applying war paint. I was preparing to bury the woman I had been for the last decade. The meek Elena, the supportive Elena, the Elena who cooked dinner while her husband bought jewelry for another woman. She died tonight. A courier buzzed the intercom at 8 o'clock. Grant was in the shower, singing loudly, so I answered the door. It was a small, velvet-wrapped box with a card embossed with a single initial, C. I took it into the kitchen and opened it. Inside lay a diamond pendant, a single, teardrop solitaire that probably cost more than the average American home. The note beneath it was handwritten in elegant, sharp script. Wear this tomorrow. Let them see who you belong to. I stared at the diamonds, watching them catch the light. It was beautiful. It was expensive. And it was a collar. Cameron Blackwell was marking his territory. He wanted me to walk into that boardroom wearing his jewelry, so that when he destroyed Grant, he could look at my neck and know that he owned the wife as well as the company. I closed the box with a snap. I did not put it on. I walked to the junk drawer, the one filled with old batteries and takeout menus, and dropped the velvet box inside, pushing it behind a stack of rubber bands. I belong to no one, I whispered. I grabbed my coat and slipped out of the apartment while Grant was still singing in the steam. I had one final meeting, and it was not one Cameron knew about. I met Evelyn, my lawyer, in the back booth of a 24-hour diner on Wabash. It was loud, smelling of grease and coffee, the perfect place to be invisible. Evelyn looked tired, but her eyes were alert. "Is it ready?" I asked, sliding into the booth. "The petition is finalized," Evelyn said, sliding a thick envelope across the table. "We have the proofs of infidelity, the forensic accounting of the dissipated assets, and the evidence of the fraudulent loan signature on your condo. It is a nuclear bomb." "Elena." "Good," I said. "I do not want you to file it at the courthouse first. I want you to bring a process server to the hotel tomorrow." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "To the shareholder meeting? That is aggressive. It is usually done in private." "Privacy protects the guilty," I said. "Grant cares about one thing, his public image. If I serve him at home, he will spin it. He will say we grew apart. He will play the victim. I want him served the moment the meeting ends. I want the shareholders to see it. I want the board to see it. I want the world to know that his personal life is collapsing at the exact same second as his professional life. And the media? Evelyn asked. You mentioned a leak. Nothing scandalous, I said. I just tipped off a reporter from the Financial Times that the restructuring announcement regarding Mercer and Rowe might have a surprise legal dimension. He will be in the lobby. He has a pass. Evelyn smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. You are terrifying. You know that? I learned that I had to be, I replied. My phone buzzed as I walked back to the condo. It was Silas, my private investigator. Subject, Bianca Vale has purchased a one-way ticket to Paris. Flight leaves tomorrow at noon. She is not packing heavy. She is running. I stopped on the sidewalk, looking up at the skyscrapers disappearing into the night fog. Bianca knew. She had the survival instinct of a cockroach. She sensed the trap closing, and she was cutting Grant loose to save herself. She wouldn't be at the meeting to stand by him. She would be 30,000 feet in the air, sipping champagne, while Grant was ripped apart by wolves. It was almost pitiable. Grant thought he was the main character of this story. He thought he was the hero, the genius, the lover, but he was just the carcass that the rest of us were fighting over. When I got back to the apartment, the lights were off. Grant was asleep, snoring softly in the master bedroom. I stood in the doorway, watching him. For 7 years, I had shared a bed with this man. I had folded his socks. I had listened to his dreams. I had thought we were partners. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. The woman in the reflection looked back at me. She was dressed in black. Her lips were red. Her eyes were dry. Tomorrow, I told her. No one leads you anymore. Not Grant, not Cameron. You walk alone. I went to the guest room and lay down, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. I did not sleep. I rehearsed the words I would say. I stripped the emotion out of them until they were just facts. Hard, cold, undeniable facts. At 2 a.m, my burner phone vibrated one last time. It was Cameron. 9 o'clock. Don't be late. It was a command, a reminder of who held the purse strings. He thought I was nervous. He thought I needed his guidance. He thought I was going to walk into that room and play the dutiful, silent partner until he gave me permission to speak. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. I thought about the $150 million. I thought about the condo. I thought about the diamond necklace in the junk drawer. I typed my reply. I won't be late. I am just changing the script. I hit send, then turned the phone off. I closed my eyes and finally, for the first time in 3 months, I slept, and I didn't dream of anything at all. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Blackwell Tower was a glass cage suspended over the city of Chicago. It was packed with 20 shareholders, 3 members of the board, and a battery of lawyers who charged more per hour than my father used to make in a month. Grant stood at the head of the mahogany table, vibrating with the kind of confidence that only the truly delusional possess. He adjusted his tie, flashed a winning smile at the stony-faced investors, and checked his watch. He leaned down to whisper to me, "Watch this, Elena. In 10 minutes, I become a legend." I sat to his right, dressed in the severe black suit I had pulled from the back of my closet the night before. I did not smile back. I placed my leather folder on the table, aligning the edges perfectly with the coaster. "Just remember your lines, Grant." At exactly 9 o'clock, the double doors swung open. The room fell silent. Cameron Blackwell walked in. He did not look like a savior. He looked like an executioner who enjoyed his work. He walked past Grant's extended hand without even a glance, moving directly to the podium at the front of the room. He plugged his laptop into the console, and the large screen behind Grant flickered to life. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cameron began, his voice devoid of warmth. "Mr. Mercer has gathered you here today under the impression that Apex Capital is providing a liquidity injection to save Mercer and Rowe Holdings." Grant nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. Mr. Blackwell and I have structured a strategic partnership to— There is no partnership, Cameron interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Grant froze, his smile twitching. Excuse me? I am not here to invest, Cameron continued, looking out at the shareholders. I am here to activate the acceleration clause on the debt held by Apex Capital. As of this morning, Mercer & Rowe is in default on 4 separate covenants. That is a lie, Grant shouted, his face flushing red. I moved the capital. I secured the liquidity last night. The $48 million is safe. Cameron tapped a key on his laptop. The screen behind Grant changed. It displayed a bank transfer log. You mean this $48 million? Cameron asked. The funds you wired yesterday to Blue Horizon Ventures in the Cayman Islands? A transfer you authorized using a falsified board resolution? A gasp went through the room. The shareholders began whispering furiously. That is a consulting fee, Grant stammered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. It is embezzlement, Cameron corrected. And unfortunately for you, Grant, the correspondent bank you used in Miami is a subsidiary of Apex. You did not hide the money, you handed it to me. And since you attempted to defraud a secured creditor, I am exercising my right to convert your debt into equity immediately. I am taking control of the company. You are fired. Grant looked around the room, his eyes wide with panic. He saw the angry faces of the board members. He saw the lawyers taking notes. He realized the walls were closing in. He spun toward me, grabbing my shoulder. Elena, tell them. Tell them we talked about this. Tell them you are the advisor. You fix this. I stood up slowly. I shrugged his hand off my shoulder as if it were a piece of lint. I am not an advisor, Grant, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. And I am not your wife, not anymore. I signaled to the back of the room. Evelyn, my lawyer, stepped forward and slapped a thick stack of documents onto the table in front of Grant. I filed for divorce 6 weeks ago, I announced, looking Grant dead in the eye. I did not serve you because I needed to ensure you could not drain our personal assets like you drained the company. Those papers contain a restraining order on all joint accounts and a lis pendens on the condo. You cannot sell it. You cannot leverage it. It is locked. You knew? Grant whispered, the color draining from his face until he looked like a corpse. You helped him? I helped myself, I replied. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the glass doors. Let me in. I am a shareholder. I have rights. It was Bianca. She pushed past a security guard, her hair disheveled, looking nothing like the polished socialite from the gala. She had clearly missed her flight or been stopped at the gate. She stormed into the room, pointing a manicured finger at Grant. He lied to me, she shrieked. He told me he had the money. I am not going down with him. She turned to the board. I have evidence. I have recordings of him admitting to fraud. I want immunity. Before she could take another step, 2 men in gray suits stepped out from the group of lawyers standing near the window. I recognized the lead counsel for the Vale Family Trust. Miss Vale, the lawyer said, his tone bored. Your father has invoked the morality clause in your trust fund. Your access to family capital was suspended as of 8 o'clock this morning. You have no standing here. Security, please remove her. You cannot do this, Bianca screamed as the guards took her arms. I am a Vale. Not anymore, the lawyer said. As Bianca was dragged out, kicking and screaming, the room fell into a stunned silence. Grant slumped into his chair, defeated. Cameron looked at me. He had a look of triumph in his eyes. He had won. He had the company. He had destroyed the Vale reputation to lower their stock price. He expected me to sit down, shut up, and wait for my check, but I remained standing. There is one last piece of business, I said. Cameron frowned slightly. We are done here, Mrs. Stone. We can discuss the settlement in private. No, I said. We will discuss it now. I pulled a flash drive from my pocket and plugged it into the console on the table, overriding Cameron's display. A new document appeared on the screen. It was a draft of the blind trust agreement Cameron had prepared for my $150 million. Mr. Blackwell promised me a settlement for my cooperation. I told the room. However, my private investigator found an interesting clause in the fine print of the trust structure he created. Clause 4B. It states that in the event of a reorganization of the parent company, which is happening right now, the assets in the trust would be frozen and reinvested into Apex Capital for a lockout period of 10 years. Cameron went rigid. For the first time, the mask slipped. He stared at me with genuine shock. He never intended to pay me, I said, looking at the shareholders. He intended to use my money to fund his acquisition of the Vale properties. I turned to Cameron. So here is the new deal. You will sign the amended agreement I have right here. It transfers the $150 million immediately into a verified account at a bank of my choosing. $50 million goes to a legal defense fund for me. $100 million goes to buy back my father's family business and the house in Wilmette. Free and clear. You get no control. You get no lockout period. And if I refuse? Cameron asked, his voice low and dangerous. Then I send the file I have on your previous takeover to the Department of Justice. I smiled. The one where the minority shareholder committed suicide? My investigator found the buried emails. Cameron, I know you planted the evidence in that case too. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the hard drives. Cameron stared at me for a long, agonizing 10 seconds. He looked at the screen. He looked at Grant, broken in the chair. He looked at me, standing tall in my black suit. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. It wasn't a nice smile, but it was a real one. It was the smile of a chess master who realizes his opponent has just checked him. Well played, Elena, he said softly. He pulled a pen from his pocket and signed the document on the table without reading it. I suppose that is fair. I prefer partners who actually read the fine print. He looked at the security guards. Escort Mr. Mercer out of the building and call the police. I believe we have a wire fraud case to file. Grant was lifted from his chair, sobbing quietly. He didn't even look at me as he was led away. He was a ghost. I picked up my signed agreement and my leather folder. I didn't look back at the board. I didn't look back at the empty chair where my husband used to sit. I walked out of the glass cage and down the long hallway toward the elevators. I heard footsteps behind me. Elena, Cameron called out. I stopped and turned. He was standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets. You could have asked for more, he said. With that leverage, you could have asked for half the company. I do not want your company. Cameron, I said. I just wanted my life back, and I charged you a premium for the inconvenience. He laughed. You are dangerous, if you ever want a job. I have a job, I said, pressing the elevator button. I am managing my own portfolio now. The elevator doors opened. I stepped in, just before they closed. Cameron leaned forward. I told you, he said, his gray eyes glinting. Don't wait 3 months to become someone they cannot touch. The doors slid shut, and I watched his face disappear. As the elevator began its descent, I saw my reflection in the polished steel doors. I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a wife. I saw a woman who had walked through fire and come out holding the match. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Morgan Revenge Stories. If you enjoyed watching Elena take down everyone in the room, please smash that like button and subscribe for more satisfying payback. I want to know where you are listening from right now. Drop your city or country in the comments below so we can see how far this story has traveled. And if you really want to support the channel, hit that hype button to help this video get discovered by more people who need a little revenge inspiration. See you in the next one.